Says there's a paid website that analyzes 1,000+ academic articles and generates a review. It looks like GPT can achieve the same thing if I make my own GPT titled writing a review on X and put all the article PDFs in my Google Drive and then connect the Google Drive. Does this sound correct? Oh.
I believe that the main pitfall with GPT is your own creativity. So as long as you're creative, you have ideas, use cases, and so on, you could pretty much make anything work. Whether that's analyses, writing, automating of tasks, you could do pretty much anything. Um, Obviously, it helps if you know how to program or you have an understanding of systems. Then you're really able to build full-scale applications.
That's a question. I mean, on this topic, how much are you having to sort of like debug code? Like, what I mean, and maybe even like if you've tried it in a few different like languages, are there differences in quality between like Python versus, I don't know, R?
So Python is, I would say for the most part, extremely well written, especially if you tell GPT, hey, you're a software engineer. You're going to help me write this. Then it shifts the nodes to being a software engineer. It'll actually write faster code if you just give it the simple prompt, you're a software engineer. If you write something like you're a data scientist, it does a very good job at explaining great information. Now, when it comes to debugging, I've had trouble with things like Pascal or Lisp, which I don't touch a lot, and that's probably why it has an issue with it, because there's not a lot of information. They're older languages. Something like R likely is also very, I would say, well written. Now, when it comes to the environments, that's when it gets a little tricky. So maybe GPT can give you some specific code that works in its environment. However, it doesn't mean that it'll work on your computer. And that's a thing that we're going to take a quick look at least for Python in this section. And we'll go ahead and also perhaps dive into other things if we have time.
Sorry, just one more thing. So in general, are you find that you get better results if you kind of define, like, it's just curious that you'd have to tell it you're a software engineer.
Yeah.
Somehow that'd make a difference. Like that seems,
Yeah, that makes a huge difference.
that's not intuitive to me, but like I'm just curious. You're saying like it taps into some other part of his model that it just, it goes from being a generalist to like narrowing down
Being a
to some,
specialist, yeah.
and if you tell it that specifically, that helps.
Yeah, so that helps a lot. And what helps is when we said customizing your own GPT and we write those instructions, you could say, what I usually do is, I'm a data scientist, and how is it supposed to respond? You're supposed to respond as a software engineer to make me write or help me write efficient code that will work and uses these things or these metrics. And that's what I usually do as like a pre-filter. I've deleted my custom instructions for this presentation, but the customization portion, if you are in a specific role that just requires you to do one thing, customize that as much as possible, and it should filter most mistakes out. When it comes to, like I said, programming, it hardly does the mistake with Python. I've been programming since not that long, maybe 2019. However, sometimes I think it writes better code than I do. Because if I don't see a simple mistake or so on, which is another thing, it can help you debug, and it can help you perhaps learn new things. I didn't know about this update in Python where it was like a new logic operator. And it was like, hey, it's a little slow. You could use this new thing. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know about that. Okay, and now we're going into, yep, question?
We're chatting just now, because I think what I was trying to figure out is how to, like, if I can imagine I have to write code for a classifier, any classifier. I can ask ChatGPT to write the code or like help me find the packages, but what I will, and then run it in any other environment. But I think maybe it's much more useful if I can just like take already the model that they have and then give it my data and then just give me the output conditional of me being able to replicate it.
So you're saying you already have some code and you just want the output?
No, like imagine, like there's two approaches for this. Imagine I have just to classify, again,
Okay.
cats and dogs. I can ask ChatGPT to help me create code for doing that myself, or I can try to just give it the photos to ChatGPT and then give it back. And
Yep.
if we think ChatGPT model in the background is better than what I can code in my computer, I should be leaning towards the second option, right? But the problem there is I need to be able to replicate this if I want to publish that.
Yep.
So yeah, how to manage those two approaches. And
So personally, I do a lot of machine learning, and like I said, I specialize in Python, which is not really a programming language, but that's a debate. So I already have a pre-made pipeline that I have to do all these things. But sometimes it is handy to perhaps take my output or my specific model and paste it onto ChatGPT and say, hey, I have a current issue, help me debug, or like the specific process, or say a sample data set, it's giving me a score of like 74. I want to increase it to at least 80. What can I do? Then it starts giving suggestions. You could then ask it, say from scratch, I made a linear regression on my own, and I say, hey, provided this data, create a linear regression model. Sometimes ChatGPT will be able to then get some pre-processing steps, and we'll see that here, that I might have missed or maybe even noticed, right? And it'll be able to increase the performance of the model. Where the limitations come is if you are on the first tier of paid subscriptions, like I am, the computational power is a lot less than if you have like the enterprise version, which a lot of enterprises do have something comparable to the highest.
what I was trying to say is like maybe it's better for me not to try to write my own code, but just like rely completely on their model.
What's your goal?
Just to classify something.
So
Imagine I just want to classify. I can do my own version and ask how to tweak my version, or I can just give the pictures and ask it.
I think that's a more of a philosophy argument, because even though ChatGPT could create a model for you, you won't really. So, like I said before, there's variance, and there's temperature, and other things that you need to consider. However, if you're just asking GPT to do your work for you, you might not develop those skills to help you debug something that GPT can create. At times, it might create an issue, or there's a very specific case. Perhaps you have domain knowledge of a subject that GPT does not. And knowing those things will help, whenever you're programming, creating models. So really like philosophical question, would you rather just get the answer or work hard and then possibly not be as good as a system that could have saved you about 7 hours of work? It really depends on your use case. However, I will say that GPT is probably the best way to enhance your learning. So if you use it for that specific purpose, you can likely exponentially increase your learning rate. Now, this section, I'll probably be sitting down and just uploading data sets, just so you could have a quick walk around. These data sets are very small, and that's because of the nature of this presentation. We don't want to be here all day, but the things we do should scale majority of the time. Also, some of these data sets are kind of hard to work with, even by hand. So showing how these are going to work will likely give you a good understanding, and how to use it on, say, something that you have is already a structured data or already normalized and so on. So our first data set is an S&P 500 data set that we got from Yahoo Finance. Go ahead and open this. And we are just going to use the regular GPT. However, your responses. Oh, wow, I've hit the plus limits already. That's a first. Okay, let's see. Oh, perhaps that's the legacy. Let's take a quick look. So for this first portion, we'll go ahead and upload a data set. Should be in Documents, GenAI Workshop, data set. And what this data set is, it's basically the top 25 companies in the S&P 500 between a range of 2022 to 2023. And we are going to say, using the provided data set, create a bar chart of each company's values at the beginning of the year. I've misspelled year right there, so. Okay, cool. So as you can see with a simple prompt, it's able to analyze the data set that I provided it, and it provided me with an output. So that's pretty cool, but honestly, that's a crappy bar chart. It's, I want the axes flipped. Perhaps I don't like the specific grids. I think that comes from matplotlib. So I want to use something instead. Let me go ahead and follow up. I'll say flip the x and y axes. Then I'll say sort the chart by, we'll say, descending order. And lastly, we'll say to use Seaborn. So Seaborn is a better plotting library than the standard one. Yep.
Beat me, but I'm just curious, like when you had done the cat coloring book page, you had mentioned like that it wasn't able just to like emit or like to tweak specific, elements of the picture, but here you are. And this is there a different model happening here? Like why are you able to do that here but not in the
Yep.
images?
So the reason why this is able to do this, it's because it's actually writing this code in the background, versus when it comes to image generation, it's using an external model named Dolly to generate the images.
Okay.
I believe, so there was a recent update, not with GPT, but a model owned by Elon Musk that is able to tweak images based on descriptions. But that came out like 3 days ago, so I couldn't fit into today's slides. Also, I don't have their paid subscription. I guess if you're looking at different models, if to enhance your workflow, start off with ChatGPT, understand what you're really using it for, and then you could scale into the different models. They're usually more specialized in different things, but they're also a lot more expensive. I believe when I looked into Sonnet, it was like $80 a month, which unless you're a software engineer and you're going to code that much, there's some trade-offs.
Sure.
Oh, and so that's cool. It actually did use Seaborn this time, but I don't like the gradient colorway. So I'm going to say use solid colors only. And we'll see if it catches the context. Sometimes that's why I say it's okay, and it was able to catch the context. So that's pretty good, because if you look at documentation, you would have had to go look for the color hue, paste it, and so on. Here, you can just ask it, and it's able to recognize that solid means no gradient, like we saw in the previous graph. And it provides it to me. Now, if you are new to, say, something like visualizations, there's actually a guideline by Tableau that I've linked, and you can open that up, and here it is right here. All of these can usually be generated with something like GPT. They might not be interactive during the UI, but if you were to download the code, create it yourself, they can become interactive. And these are just guidelines. Say if you're relatively new or just want to learn something new, go ahead and read this website or reference it. And again, the thing about using Seaborn instead of Matplotlib, these are tips in general. So be familiar with Python and the tools that it uses. Also, use custom instructions. If you can actually say, hey, I want solid colors only, I want a specific format done, say maybe a color theme for your organization or homework and so on, go ahead and do that. Another thing is understand, again, GPT should enhance, not replace your work. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So as we saw, GPT was able to create a bar chart, but I'd say in general, bar charts are not really good for something like, doing stock evaluations. We're looking at more like time series stuff. Before we head into that, I should probably discuss that. You can create just about anything. So if we say, write a pie chart representing these values instead. Personally, I don't like pie charts, but some people look for them. The only time you should use a pie chart is, say, if your responses are binary, yes or no, split decisions. Other than that, it becomes very difficult. I just wanted to show that it can also do a little bit more complex things. And it remembers to put percentages in there. It's not just a blank bar chart. So that's pretty cool. It's able to do a lot. Now this would have probably, if you're programming it, maybe would have taken you 10 minutes if you're really good at this. So it saves you maybe 9 minutes. Now, I'm going to go ahead and paste the next prompt since we're running a little short on time today. And the next prompt says, we're going to create another bar chart. But this time, we're only going to continue using the top 10 stocks. And we're going to show the percentage of each company. And this is a stack bar chart. So what that means is we're going to see the initial value and the end value. So we could see that percentage increase from the S&P from the beginning to the end of the year. And it go ahead and does that pretty well, actually. So just showing a little bit of the functionality. But this doesn't really tell you much, especially if you're looking at stocks. This is more of a time series thing. So we're going to go ahead and convert this into a time series graph. So we're saying time series format. And this implies that it needs to use some type of line graph. And that's what it does. And you shouldn't stack things so close. When you're analyzing stuff, you should maybe have 1 or 2, possibly 3. But it does this pretty well. And what I wanted to show is that it knows that time series means lines. And that's the amazing part of it. You don't have to be so specific. Now, we can go as far as if you know how to program and you've done this before, It's very difficult if you want to make one line change colors depending on intervals, right? So you could actually do that. So let's say, let's see UNH, the lines should be green when at positive value and turn red when they lower in price. So this prompt is written a little sloppy just to see if it understands the context. As you can see, the terminology, one, it's not professional, two, it's not consistent, but the new models are usually able to pick up, so we'll see if it works. But as you can see, it's taking a lot longer to process now. Still does it, which is pretty cool. So now I could see where I'm losing money, where I'm gaining, where I'm losing, so on. Don't look at those things every day. They'll drive you crazy. So on to our next graph. So looking at time series or stock relations, I think that's pretty easy and we can mostly understand this. Where a lot of cognitive work comes is that we need to do something like statistical visualizations. And for this, we're going to use a slightly different data set. Let's close that and close that. And we're going to say, using the provided data, filter the data set to only include 2022 data. So step number one, we're filtering. Was that a question? So what are we doing now? So we're looking at a different data set. This data set includes data science positions or data science adjacent positions that were set up, I think, between the ranges of 2020 and 2024. We're filtering, and we're also going to, well, that filtering factor is basically restricting if we go back to prompting. And also, we're providing it follow-up questions, not questions, but demands, like create a histogram using Seaborn, and then overlay the distribution line metrics. And as you can see, this starts taking a little bit longer to process. And there we go. So, does a pretty good job, provides some descriptions, so the mean and the STD. And now we have some follow-up questions on the data analysis. So we're going to say, you see how there's like a huge spike in the middle? So we want to see exactly what's going on. So let's create a box plot of the job titles. So if we, like I said, these were data science questions and also, not questions, jobs, and also some other data science adjacent jobs. And now if we look at our box plot, we can actually see they're not all in the same quantity, right? So we start to question, well, now we should be doing maybe some pre-processing of our data, right? Instead of just plotting it right away. You can, if you're not exactly sure how to go to the next step, you can simply ask ChatGPT. So what we're doing now is we're saying, hey, this looks a little funky. Let's do some general statistical work on the job titles, and provide me the results in a tabular format. And it goes ahead and provides this to me. As you can see, it's also downloadable and expandable. So whatever you want to do with this, and we start to see the problem. So AI scientist, the count is 2. Data analyst, a lot higher, and so on. So that's the problem that we're seeing, a lot of repetitive, because if we're looking at the job market, there'll be more of a log normal distribution, because the entry level would be kind of like shifted this way. As you gain more experience, you increase, and then you start going along the way. Say you move up into more senior positions. And on that note, we can say, can you compare salaries based on experience of only data science positions? And again, GPT is able to process this and provide me with experience level. So entry, middle, and senior.
Like we can either, this goes back to my question, we can either ask it for the code to run this in our computer or.
Yeah, we're going to do this right now.
I don't know, but then here you're saying I fully trust whatever the GPT is giving me back, while the other one is not. I mean, you can double check.
Yeah, so the reason why I'm fully just trusting this right now is because I assume that you won't just plug in your information and you'll print it out and submit it. What I'm thinking the use case is, say you're having hard trouble like analyzing a data set, and you just want to create some quick things to dig around, some EDA, then you're able to use this. However, always, it shouldn't replace your work. It should only enhance it, right? So the last thing is, we're going to ask, we're going to say, explain our data for 2022, data science, salaries, and then explain the distribution and provide supporting evidence with charts. So now what we're doing is we're saying, hey, I don't know what to do. What do you suggest we do, specifically for data science jobs? So then it gives me a pretty quick overview. You could have done this from the beginning, but like I said, I want to show the capabilities of it, not just jump to the end and say, hey, do the thing. And here, it's actually doing what I would have done, which is look at the statistics, look at the box plots, do analysis on that, and also group it, right? And the analysis, yep, it varies on experience level, as we showed with the job market. Now we can say something like, hey, can you create a presentation based on this data set, include all charts, analysis, and findings? Questions?
Yeah, I've actually held questions just in the interest of time.
Okay.
Sorry, I keep thinking we're gonna have more time. More
It's pretty
pauses.
fast, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And let me scoot this over. So as we can see, now it's our PowerPoint, and we have the visualizations. We saw what we did, conclusion. So it does a very basic job. But we could also ask for more details. We could say, hey, I want a 100-page PowerPoint. Have this as the headers, and it can help you troubleshoot. Also, when you might be familiar with Designer. So Designer has been around for a very long time. It's actually a GenAI model, right? And it has an element of almost, I guess you could call it a suggestion system. However, now there's a ChatGPT PowerPoint option here next to Designer. And what this can do is it can help you with anything from creating from scratch, create text. You could grab a YouTube video and just paste it in, suggest the slide number, and it'll break it up into those specific slides that you want. It'll be able to process the topics. Just as we saw, it can create outlines from text. It can also create outlines from video. So you could convert it easily. Now you could also, like I said, connect it to whatever. What I find really helpful is that it can generate speaker notes. So if you have more, I think, than 52 characters, you're able to generate speaker notes on whatever the topic is. And let's see if it does it here. No, not you, Designer. Okay. And I believe this is free for PowerPoint users. And there you can see it creates speaker notes for whatever topic was on the slide. So it can help with not just data analysis, question answering, writing, also presentations. Obviously, always feel free to edit whatever you get from ChatGPT. And the images aren't really helpful. They're just stock images. And this section right here, you can actually brainstorm with this GPT plugin and create ideas. You could also say you want specific formats. You could also choose that, but it'll help you along the way. It'll help you with placement, design, and all those other things. And that's pretty much a way to analyze your data, output your data to a PowerPoint, and then work on it. Let's go ahead and close this now. Now, that was just some statistical things. Let's get to the data workflow. We don't just do statistical work and see some charts. We also do some modeling majority of the time. So in this case, let's go ahead and jump into GPT and upload our data set. And here we'll say, we'll actually role prompt a little bit. We'll say you are a data scientist and helping me with the modeling steps, this data set. And one thing I'm going to do this time is I'm going to say deeply analyze. Another thing, which is a restriction, I'm going to say, before you do anything, make sure to ask me. Because when you just give GPT whatever, it will be very hard to go back and debug. So if you can stop it, make sure it's following the correct steps along the way. I guess that these things aren't perfect. we'll say doing anything. So now what we're seeing is it's able to take my data and also go into each column and provide me the context for each one of these columns. Sometimes that's useful because you might not be very familiar with acronyms or what things mean, but this actually provides me with context, which is pretty neat. If you were to look at the raw data set, it does not say like a 2-hour serum insulin. It just gives you the metrics, right? So that's pretty cool. Now it gives me some summary statistics. So it's able to tell me that some values have 0. So possible values to either impute or drop, it really depends. It says BMI is roughly 32, which is an overweight category. How does it know this? This goes back to what data has already been fed in to the model, so pre-existing knowledge, and it puts that into context for this specific data set. So it can help you with interpreting data, and especially what things mean, what should be normal and what is not normal. And then it tells me potential issues, the 0 values, right? So what we are going to say is, provide me with the pre-processing steps you think we should do. Just to give you background on this data set, it was actually a Kaggle Yep.
How does it know that outcome means having diabetes?
Oh, it knows that based on the context of the values. So like I said before, it's completely based on pre-existing knowledge. So the outcome, binary, yes or no, on the data set tells you, hey, diabetes, yes or no. So we can now ask it to, hey, what are the pre-processing steps? Give you a little bit of background. This data set is actually really hard to work with. It was a Kaggle competition, and the winner was awarded like $50,000. I think the person at the time got like 95% or something like that. If you run this without processing anything with a baseline like logistic regression model, I think it gives you roughly like 42% F1 score, which is huge disparity between the highest score, right? So the reason why it's very hard to work with is limited data, number 1. Number 2, the data that you do have is incomplete. And number 3, you also have a skewed value of population. So this is for a very specific ethnic group. And also, it's out of the normal ranges. The normal range is not 32 of a BMI, right? So now you could see it pretty much gave me all the pre-processing steps that we should take, and also some optional ones, like reducing the dimensions, data augmentation, and we'll go ahead and say, handle the first 6 steps for me. Question? No? Questions from chat?
Can it create the presentation using latex? This is back to your PowerPoint thing from a few minutes ago.
Yep, you got it.
Is there any, you want to elaborate on that? Or you can just tell it.
Yep, so be very specific, just like when we went back to the prompts format, so that should be latex, right? So that goes into those 3 pillars in the beginning. Always format, stylize, and limit or restrict. Now, as I specifically said, hey, do the first 6 steps because they'll break. It seems like there was an issue with handling the 0 values. Let me fix that issue. Ran into it again. What it's basically doing, it's in a constant for loop until it resolves the issue itself. or you run out of tokens, right? So it's really up to you. So now we have the data set, and it tells you what it did and what are the outcomes of doing this. Now, I'm going to say, cool, let's go ahead and proceed. Those last steps that I said were optional, those take a very long time. So because it's already 4:11, we're going to go ahead and skip those. Just know it could do those, except for one, which we'll go over. We'll say, now create a machine learning model to resolve, well, we'll just say for this data set. And the reason why I'm doing this is to show the capabilities. It understands the data set. We can't just apply any model to any data because it's really dependent on that. So what it's going to do is it's going to outline the steps, and it's going to implement it. Hopefully it doesn't break. I said to stop it before, but okay. So yeah, it's being a disobedient child right now. However, we could see just based on the processing steps that we've done, the accuracy is already at around 70, F1 score of 54. That's a lot better than the baseline, which is in the 40s. Yep.
I'm just curious if this experiment has been done, like, can I just give it a data set of a paper and ask it what is novel about this data set? And we'll come up with.
It depends how much data. There is a limit. I believe you can only upload 10 documents into one chat with the lowest tier paid version. And from those 10 documents, each one of them has a limit of 500 megabytes, I believe. But yep, so on that question though, it really depends, because if your data, say hypothetically, it's able to go into the model, it's highly unlikely that it will be able to be as good as like an expert. So those outcomes might not reflect the paper, right? But it's a good starting point, just like I've been saying, and it gives me an interpretation of this. Now, I know the main issue with this specific data set is that it doesn't have enough data. So I'm going to say, let's create synthetic data, or we'll say, let's check the class balance of this data. So that's our first issue right there, right? Which is one of the steps that I actually cut off from it. It did suggest it, class imbalance. However, I didn't address it. That's likely why we have such a bad score, even though it was an improvement. So we're going to say, try using SMOTE. So that's a synthetic sampling technique. And this is where we might hit a wall. It seems like imbalanced learn is not available. So because it hits a wall, and the reason why it hits the wall is because this environment is contained, this module was deprecated, so it can no longer run. Instead, what it does is it provides you with the code to run it yourself. So if it ever does run into these limitations, it'll tell you, hey, try it on your own. You could always copy and paste the code back in to troubleshoot. In this case, we'll say, just try another technique. So you could always find alternatives with it, at least so you could compare, right? So after adjusting, F1 score goes up to 64. Huge improvement, right? So that was one of the main, I would say, pitfalls of that data set. And it's able to solve it with that technique. I believe if you SMOTE, this goes up to about 70, which is a better I would say, approach to it. However, the highest was like 90 something. Anyways, you could go back and forth with it, trying different techniques, different models too. So this is just a simple logistic regression model. You could try something like what other models would work well. I stop myself sometimes from being too specific, just so I can show. So it shows random forest, gradient boosting, support vector machines, KNNs. So it has knowledge of pretty much most machine learning models, if not all. It can also apply neural networks, AdaBoost, polynomial features. And remember, this is just the base model. It hasn't been tuned. So potentially you could also do hypertuning, but that's another limitation that we'll run into. If we say something like, so something like random forests, and there's so many nodes, it's going to run into computational issues, and I'm hoping it breaks so I could show that. And that's one of the limitations that you will run into if you're relying on this to do your scoring, right? So run it on your own machines. This should create workable code, at least majority of the time. Any questions?
Can you share the Tableau link for visualization?
Yeah, that's actually on the slide itself. And on the slide, there's a hyperlink to the Tableau dataset. 3 out of the 4 datasets are also linked, so it'll take you directly to Kaggle if you want to download the dataset.
Other quick ones. I want to make sure this person, how do you get, sorry, how do you get to a new line if you're doing a multi-line prompt?
Oh, shift return.
Shift return. Okay, someone put that in the chat. Thank you, Dante, for putting that in there. And then someone else said, how do you get 2 responses from one prompt? Is that something that you can kind of like force it to do, or is that just something that happens every so often?
In the sense of from the same chat get 2 different responses, or different chats getting different responses?
Well, there's been a couple times when you've like
Oh.
put in one prompt and it'll give you 2 options.
Yep. So remember when we talked about the variance and temperature? So it's completely based on that. If it's too close, say it's like a 49-51, it'll give you both responses based on the confidence interval that this is a good response. That confidence interval has been calculated through human feedback, which is why if you click on sharing your data, when you're going through prompts, they'll tell you was this helpful or not. And there's also engineers, working on this in the background.
Sure. So it's kind of like an A/B test.
Yep.
In a way, yeah. One more. There's one more if you've got time.
Yep.
Any suggestions how to set customization such as to mimic setting temperature down to 0?
Yep.
In
So
an unpaid version.
Use formal language is one of them. Another one is base your facts or responses only on scholarly material. So you can do this all through just, I would say, semantic logic, saying, hey, I want you to act like a certain thing, be a certain thing. And as we could see, it broke. It doesn't work. The reason is it's too computationally expensive. Grid search is not going to run on the interface because there's too many people on it, right? So they've imposed these. Back in when GPT-4 was first released, you could actually do multi-processing on like 10 models and hypertune them all. And the thing would run for like 5 hours, and it would give you an output and the source code. It was awesome. No longer exists. Now, say we are pretty much at the end of it, and and we can no longer do anything with GPT itself. We can do something like, could you help me set this virtual environment on a Mac using conda commands. And misspelled environment, but that's okay. So we applied 2 restrictions, right? That was it's on a Mac, and 2, it's on conda, so it knows it's on terminal, not command line. And 2, it's conda, so it's not using pip or VM. And what it does is it tells me the Python version, it tells me how to activate the environment, the installed packages, and also, since it knows that I'm using conda, it infers that I'll use Jupyter Notebook, which is pretty cool because it's an additional command that you'll need to install Jupyter. So if we go down, and then it even gives you an example workflow of it so you can submit the script. And that's how you can move from things being on GPT to local, and you can iterate on the process, you can make it better. Later on, you copy and paste your code, and you could improve it. Say you want to do multiprocessing or use a GPU for processing. You could also ask it for advice. All this is like really limited to your use case and how creative you can be. Now, there's also synthetic data generation. GPT takes a very long time whenever it wants to do this. So what I suggest to do is to use a different model. Also, GPT is, like we've said, a general model, and this is where I'll start to mention other models, right? There's something called a CT-GAN, and it's also a generative model. But in this case, it takes tabular data and then creates the synthetic data for it. I've linked the platform down here. Oh no, down here, Gradle.ai. And you can sign in. And you can create projects here. So this is also for machine learning. I believe it's HIPAA compliant too. So if you have an organization or sensitive data, you could set that up on the project side. And here's a demo actually. So you know what, let's start from the beginning. So let's create a new project. And we'll say DM2. Then we can go to, so this is one of the functionalities, synthetic data creation using a generative AI model. You could do fine tuning, as you could see. GPT-3 is installed on this website, so it's not 4, so it won't be as great. However, it's been hybrid tuned for this specific machine learning use case, so it might be comparable, right? Did I mention it has fine tuning right there? So let's go ahead and just select this. Let's select it already. Okay, so we'll only do this because we are limited in time. And going to say connection, so that's completely fine. Huh. Oh, I see what happened. So I reached my limit on this because I was working on a project 2 days ago. So yeah, but what basically would happen here is you choose whatever workflow you want to do. And usually if you choose more than one, it'll grab the workflows. You can move them around to see the process. There's pre-processing, synthetic data creation. There's a module for the GPT, like as you've seen. There's also data analysis. And it'll be able to kind of just go through all the steps as if you were using a GPT on chat, but instead through maybe just some GUIs that you could just move around. It usually works pretty fast too. So if you are new to this, I would say automating of machine learning pipelines, Gretto's a really good website to use. Just you have your limits with certain things. And that pretty much puts us at the end. We have 30 minutes left for part 4. So we'll likely skip majority of the latter portion since it's all what's coming next, theoretical stuff, and some math concepts. So for now, let's take a 3-minute break, and we'll come back to part 4. Do we have any questions from part 3? Yep. All right, cool. So we're to the last part, and we will breeze by this. And we won't cover the second half of the slides, which is majority math theory. And we're talking about, well, what's next? There's prompting frameworks. So not just prompting techniques that we've discussed. There's a way to assemble these to create better responses overall. There's also specialized GenAI models. So we'll mention those, what they do, and where to get them. Maybe we'll address the privacy concerns and what's yet to come. That's math stuff, so we might leave it out. So the framework that everyone should be familiar with is Tree of Thoughts. So what is Tree of Thoughts? It's kind of a brainstorming and resolution framework. It thinks very much like a human would. So if you have an issue, you say, okay, what are my options, right? After you say, what are my options? You list down the pros and cons. You weigh out the options, the likelihood of them, and then you're able to make an informed decision at the end. Well, this is pretty much how it works. So there was actually a paper published on this, I believe in 2023, that Tree of Thoughts made LLMs roughly about 20% more accurate. I'll link the paper. If you'd like to take a read, go ahead. And that's inherently the idea. These are the 4 prompts that you could use, copy and paste, whenever you're trying to use this framework. So the first one is, I have a problem, describe your area. Then could you brainstorm 3, so that should be in parentheses, however decisions you want. Please consider various factors, and then explain your situation. Then the evaluation phase happens. So for each of these, we're going to consider possible challenges, upsides, downsides, basically pros and cons. The expansion phase, we're going to look at everything into more of an overall view. And lastly, we're going to make a decision. So let me show a quick example of how that works. So as I've said before, I like to give ChatGPT my PowerPoint just crashed. So let me reload it. Okay. Oh, wrong page. Should be there. Okay. So we are going to look at this specific tree of thought problems. So I always like to give it an entity, as I said before. We're going to say that he is an accomplished researcher and in the field of finance, economics, and management. So you see how it says memory updated? That's it shifting the nodes to be specialized in that field. That's kind of like the first thing you should do. And I recommend doing this for almost every prompt that you do. And then what I'll do is I'm going to copy and paste the specific prompt that I have for brainstorming. So describe my problem area. I'm going to say that I want to earn a PhD. Could you brainstorm, we'll say, 5. Did I do that? Yeah. Could you brainstorm 5 possible programs? Remember, you just have to reword this for whatever the use case is. As before, we're going to limit it. So this is where the factors come into play. So I'm going to say, I want to study at UMich I come from a computer science background, now a data scientist. I want to earn a PhD somewhere in econ or finance. So what it does now is, especially if you have the online access on, it'll search the web. And I'm not exactly sure how they implemented it, but I've done this with some actual projects here where we were checking maybe the best programs for specific things. And it was able to pull programs that were just submitted yesterday to our public web. So it's pretty good at doing this, and also it scrapes everything. So PhD in economics, PhD in business administration and finance at Ross. Then it gives me Ford School of Public Health. Then it goes on to social sciences here at ISR. And then in statistics to focus on finance and economics. So this is tuned because my background is in computer science. We're usually very math heavy. And that's why it chooses these specific programs, right? Now, the next thing I like to do is I'm going to, and actually these following prompts really don't have to be changed much. So you could just copy and paste them. So for each of these, we're going to basically speak on the pros, cons, consequences, and so on. And what it will do is pull up the code, pros, cons, initial efforts. So it also tell me things like requirements, and it gets that from searching online. Not exactly sure how the possibility of success happens, but it gives me a possibility, I guess, based on people who have my background and studied in that specific program. And the next one, business admin, finance at Ross, 80%, confidence interval, high. The next program, just about 75, medium confidence interval. And then it actually summarizes these for me, telling me, hey, Ross is probably the way to go. Now the next step would be the expansion phase. So for each solution, we want a little bit more detail. Answers are not always right. However, they're usually most accurate based on what it finds on the web. And that's what Tree of Thought does, is that it allows you to brainstorm through solutions, or if you're completely lost, maybe how to start on something. As a side note, if you read the document, you'll also be able to see how it improves things like the mathematical tests, comprehension. It was able to pass pretty much every standardized high school test using Tree of Thought. And now that we've said, hey, expand my options, it starts giving me a little bit more detail on each. So necessary partnerships and resources, strategies, and so on. And this is pretty much what you would have done by hand, right? And it just automates this for you. It gives you a quick summary. And again, the probability of success are below. This becomes more intensive. You can upload your resume. What I've done before is graph my resume, upload it, have like job postings, and then say, what am I a best match for? I've applied to the jobs, and that's how I got my current position. Quick side note, don't tell anyone, Paul. Yep. So the last is the decision phase. So then it's going to weigh out the pros, cons, background, everything that we've went over, all the new information that's pulled from the web, and pre-existing knowledge. And it looks like it's sticking to Ross being my #1 choice, which when I did this analysis, because I am interested in a PhD in a similar field, and I talked to all the recruiters, I also came up to the same conclusions. And that's why this is one of my examples. And that is tree of thought. In a sense, you could use it for just about anything, as long as you're trying to brainstorm, troubleshoot, and come to a solution. It could help you at the bare minimum. If you're interested on the details of it, I highly encourage you to read the publication that is linked here above. Now, there's another one that has been blowing up online, and this is the Smart GPT framework that was actually created by a YouTuber, and apparently it's breaking a bunch of benchmarks, and he's soon to get a publication from it. What it basically does is that it's able to use zero shot, so in the beginning. So that's step 1, right? Here. Now remember, in the beginning, you always have to set it like, hey, you're an expert on so on. So that's role prompting. First step, after that, zero shot, and then chain of thought, which is here, and then the resolver. So after taking all these 3 positions, it's going to resolve at the end. The example given is the reflection phase. It tells you, hey, you're investigating X with options provided. So what it's actually doing is it's creating a counter argument, as we saw in my previous example, where we're still manning the opposing side. So this can be used for something like peer reviews or verifying information and so on. In the MLU, which is the gold standard for reasoning and logic, human experts are able to score at the highest, usually at 88%. And 89% is thought to be more of a AGI at some sense, because it would be extremely difficult for any human to score that high. However, with this method and the sample of it went from 68 to about 75, and the resolver phase, so down here, goes up to 84%, which is, I would say, better than most of us, right? I think I'll probably score in the 50s, but that's how it works. Also, I've linked the YouTube video breaking down this specific technique. It's roughly maybe 30 minutes if you want to watch it. There's also follow-ups if you're interested on using this technique, using GPT. Now, there are some other frameworks that you might run into in the wild. And we won't be covering them because we have roughly 14 minutes left. So the first one is RAG. What does RAG do? It's able to basically pull information as accurately as possible from multiple resources and synthesize them into one coherent paper. So when you're talking about writing papers or extracting information, that's the way to go. There's art, automatic reasoning, and tool usage. So what this does is that it's able to use tools and allow these AI agents to resolve each other, basically creating a new thing. Art is used for any type of websites that are automatically created, updated, and I would say serviced. So things like, if you've ever used Shopify, and have you ever seen the creation page for it? It basically, you click a couple buttons, it creates the website for you, has your product, creates the shipping, and so on. That's because it's an art model. There's also APE, so automatic prompt engineering. And what this does is it's more of a specialized version for reasoning. And how this does it is basically does huge sampling over GPTs. The GPTs talk to each other, they resolve, they go back and forth until they can come to a solution. Then there's program-aided language models. This is mainly used for, as we saw before, the other model of talking to specific agents, resolving stuff. a little closer to something like a website creation that handles itself, updates, has new ideas, and so on. And lastly, there's multimodal chain of thought. So remember chain of thought, hey, we could use it to think step by step, which that is the key word, think step by step, will usually get you a better response. Using this step by step, they've upscaled it to not only be text, but also videos. For video creation, there's a model named Sora that is soon coming out, and that can supposedly create full picture films just from a script that you can feed in. There's image creation, and that little, I guess, like switch of make a small change here can likely happen with this multimodal chain of thought. Question?
This technique seems really like how you type stuff. It's really important. And how should we think about this being a system as a robust technique as models start changing? Because maybe now this model uses this phrase, the next one will change phrase and these things.
So that won't necessarily change as long as you stick to the principles that we spoke over in part 2. All LLMs will always follow this because there's something called semantics in NLP. And semantics is back to formal logic. Formal logic being how we structure language, put it maybe into mathematical arguments, and basically a proof. And this translates over to language. That's the reason why these prompting techniques work. The frameworks are subject to change, but these are the most popular ones. But like I said before, if you go to part 2, all those things will stay relevant pretty much until AI can take over the world. And now that we're roughly about to close out, let's take a quick look at alternative GPT models. So there's Cloud Sonnet 3.5. Amazing if you're a software engineer. It's probably the best when it comes to aiding you in programming, especially if you have complex systems with different websites. That person said, hey, can you use GPT to do this? Yeah, you could. It might be a little bit more workaround. However, if you have something like Cloud Sonnet, it could likely handle all those tasks for you. You have Llama. So Llama is by Facebook. And the unique part about it is that it's actually open source, meaning that you can actually see what it's been trained on. It's not exactly as good as ChatGPT. However, some people argue that it's better because you can see what it's been trained on. That being the main differentiating factor. And if I remember correctly, it's comparable to like a base GPT-4. If you use smart prompting techniques, you'll likely get to improve maybe to a GPT-4o. Now there's data sets and limitations, security, all those things. So one, you can always ask GPT, hey, is this type of data safe to use on your website? Well, it'll be pretty honest majority of the time, right? And if it's not exactly clear, ask it again and say, in formal language, please reply to this request, right? So I think we're pretty much clear on this portion. I shouldn't have to tell anyone, hey, don't use confidential data on this website. There's ethical considerations. There's, if you're a researcher, informed consent, that's a big one. Also, we have, even if you were able to insert some noise into your data, keep in mind that likely it can be retrieved some way. So even if you fudge up the numbers, you're still not safe. Don't do it. Recommendations is always avoid GPT for sensitive data. I just felt like I have to put this in here to make a point. Use security compliant tools. So there's actually other LLMs that are compliant. We saw one of them, which was Gretel, and you can actually use HIPAA data on Gretel. And also consult your legal consultant or IT service, whatever your work. Don't do anything behind their backs. Now, it wouldn't be a U of M presentation without a U of M plug. So we have GPT here, which is basically ChatGPT, but this is specifically tuned Definitely not. Yeah, I agree. So we have GPT, and the main difference is that it's been trained on educational research that we currently have at the school or have had in the past. So it's more academically inclined. Another thing is that it adheres to ethical data usage. And lastly is that it stores the compliant measures. So we're completely fine. If you work at University of Michigan and you have access to it, you should be able to use this for majority of things. It takes more work to get the correct answers, but as long as you can prompt correctly, going back to those basic techniques from, say, section 2, you should be completely fine. Now, time to mention some other stuff for data science. So there's also Data Robot, H2IO, Google Cloud, AutoML. So this one's actually really cool. You can make full pipelines using Google services to create machine learning models. IBM Watson Studio, I've heard that's a really popular one. I haven't used it yet. And Azure Machine Learning, that's through Microsoft. Because it's through Microsoft, you can expect GPT integrations. So that's always really cool. For programming, we have Copilot, probably the most popular one. If you are somewhat in education, so hold a teacher, professor, lecturer position, you can actually get a GitHub Copilot license for free. It's usually $20 a month, but free if you're in education. There's also Codex by OpenAI. So this is a tuned version of GPT specifically for programming. There's also Tabine, AlphaCode by DeepMind, and Kite. Kite is probably the oldest one that has been around, and that's through VS Code, if I remember. Images. We saw DALL-E and how it works. That's also by OpenAI. We have Midjourney, DeepArt, ArtBreeder, and Runway ML. Those are all pretty cool. I mainly have used DeepArt and DALL-E. I think those do a pretty good job. You can also search for different GPTs for image creation. There's specific ones in pretty much every art style that you want. You could also tune it to whatever art style or dimensions that you need. Lastly, music generation. This takes a very long time. But if you've ever seen, like, say, political figures singing songs they shouldn't be singing to, this is where it comes from. Generative by Google and OpenAI's Jukebox. Those are some of the two that I've seen generate these songs. GenAI for videos. There's DALL-E. So DALL-E also does some videos. However, you do need a license, and it's really expensive. There's Sensasia, DeepArt, Picture. Basically, if they do imaging, they can also do video majority of the time. They are more expensive. They run a very long time, and it can cost a pretty buck. So I think if we're roughly 6 minutes out, we should probably end it here, but I'll run through some stuff. So what is grokking? Grokking is basically when AI learns to program itself, and that's pretty scary. That actually already happened. And there's a specific, what's the company name? Well, the model is named Grok. It was bought by Elon Musk, based off the term grokking, right? But theoretically, if you train a model enough, they'll be able to, remember we saw that drop-off when it comes to generalized task and them being on, random states, the counterfactual examples. So mathematical theory says that if you keep on training, it will actually adapt and it'll keep increasing. And that basically becomes grokking. Let's see, emergent behaviors. Like I said, this is the follow-up to grokking. There's math theory that supports this. Basically, emergent behavior says that they'll gain new abilities, not just programming themselves, but maybe create their own languages and speak to each other. There's a lot of debate within this realm. However, it's really up in the air what will happen. And there's actually some mathematical proof for things like emergence and grokking. Takeoff speeds, a quick, short description of it means takeoff speeds, even if technology is so good, the government is likely to stop it from being out to the public. And that's just so things like society can adapt to it. It's almost like Bluetooth. If you know, it's been around since maybe World War I, and we didn't get it until not so long ago. So that's, the term takeoff in technology. And we can actually close this out. This is all theory. And lastly, I know we spoke about grokking and how mathematically it's proven. Yesterday, there was actually a publication sent out where AI was actually able to generate its old publications on AI, and then different AI agents were able to verify, almost like peer reviewers, then hand it off to some like researcher reviewers, and they also signed it off, thinking that it was a real person.